Good morning, everyone. We're just gonna wait a few more seconds here to let everyone join in, and then I'll be kicking us off, and you'll hear from my amazing colleagues. Then we'll answer your questions. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm California Attorney General Rob Bonta, and I, alongside a coalition of 21 other attorneys general, are here to announce the latest legal action that we're taking against the Trump administration. California's 48th lawsuit in 44 weeks for those tracking California. This time, it's to protect food assistance for vulnerable individuals and families across our state and across the country. Today, we're filing a lawsuit challenging the U.S. Department of Agriculture's unlawful, confusing, and deeply harmful new guidance restricting eligibility for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, otherwise known as SNAP, and known in California as CalFresh. SNAP is a lifeline for 5.5 million Californians every month, for 42 million Americans every month. It helps families get groceries, it keeps children fed, it keeps people afloat during hard times. It's one of the most essential anti-hunger programs in the United States. And once again, the Trump administration is putting that lifeline at risk, and they're doing this at a moment when families are already struggling to put food on the table. Their new guidance was issued hastily, inaccurately, and without regard for the law. It misstates who's eligible for a SNAP and threatens to deprive thousands of lawful permanent residents of the food benefits that Congress guaranteed to them. At best, the guidance was sloppy and uninformed, despite the high stakes involved for the states and the low-income families served by the SNAP program. Now it appears to be deliberate. We gave USDA the chance to take back the guidance, fix its mistakes, and start over with clear, correct guidance that follows the law. USDA's silence in response tells us everything we need to know. This guidance reads like someone took notes from the Grinch, taking food from families right as the holidays arrive. California will not stand by while families lose access to food because of unlawful federal action. So we are taking Trump to court. Let's be clear about what the USDA did. Earlier this year, Congress passed the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which eliminated SNAP eligibility for individuals who entered the U.S. as refugees, were granted asylum or humanitarian parole. But the law is equally clear about what it didn't do. It didn't say that these individuals remain permanently barred from food assistance. It didn't prohibit them from becoming eligible when they adjust their status and become lawful permanent residents. And it certainly didn't allow USDA to rewrite federal law to create new barriers that Congress never enacted. Yet, USDA's new guidance does exactly that. The guidance misclassifies entire groups of lawfully present immigrants as not eligible when the law says they're eligible once they become lawful permanent residents. It incorrectly suggests that refugees, asylees, and certain other humanitarian entrants must wait 5 years after obtaining legal permanent resident status when the law exempts these categories of individuals from the 5-year waiting period. And it imposes these errors on states with virtually zero time to implement them, claiming that a mandatory 120-day transition period ended just 1 day after the guidance was issued. This puts states in an impossible situation, risking higher error rates and jeopardizing food access for families who've done everything right. That's why we're asking the court to declare the guidance unlawful, enjoin the USDA from implementing the guidance, and ensure that states aren't penalized for errors caused by USDA's own mistakes. Unlike USDA's guidance, the law is clear, and the Trump administration is breaking it yet again. We're stepping in to protect the impacted individuals and families who rely on SNAP. And this isn't happening in a vacuum. Families who rely on SNAP are still recovering from the whiplash of the recent government shutdown when the Trump administration tried to block November SNAP benefits. Not one, but two federal courts ruled that attempt unlawful. And when the administration asked the U.S. Supreme Court to pause those rulings and block benefits, we fought that too. In the midst of the shutdown, USDA issued error-filled guidance and made it effective 1 day later in violation of its own regulations. Now it's going full steam ahead with guidance it knows is faulty and it knows will have the effect of once again cutting off access to food for some of our most vulnerable families. The reality is, after losing in court again and again, the Trump administration is still trying to find ways to deprive families that are barely scraping by of basic food assistance that the law affords them. They are working overtime to deprive hungry Americans of food. And we won't let misinformation or political agendas dictate who gets to eat. No one should lose access to benefits because the federal government failed to follow its own laws. We're fighting back to make sure that doesn't happen. Today's lawsuit defends the rule of law. It's about ensuring that the ability to feed your family doesn't depend on the federal government getting its paperwork right. Our message to the Trump administration is straightforward. You can't misinterpret federal law to get your way. You can't rush states into compliance with contradictory instructions, and you can't take food away from people based on guidance that violates the law. California will always stand up for the millions of people who rely on programs like SNAP to survive. I want to take a brief moment to thank our partners, including New York Attorney General Tish James, Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield. You'll be hearing from Keith Ellison from Minnesota, Andrea Campbell from Massachusetts, and also want to just make a special shout out to my outstanding team that helped get us to where we are today, including Kathleen Borgers, Robin Goldfaden, Marissa Malouf, a great team that I'm honored to serve with every day. Thank you all again for joining us today. We'll come back at the end for questions, but now I want to turn it over to my incredible partner, Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield.
Thanks, everyone. I'll be incredibly quick. It's wild and absolutely stupid that we have to be here today, a day before Thanksgiving. We're one of the most wealthy countries in the world, and no one should go hungry in America. And it's absolutely absurd that we're having this press conference here today, a day before Thanksgiving. So just put very clear, when this came out, I think a lot of us were thinking this has to be a mistake. These are lawful residents. The law is incredibly clear. Why would the USDA be yanking food benefits away from people? Because we actually genuinely thought this could be a mistake, a letter was sent earlier this month. No response was received. And that's why the lawsuit is being filed here today. It's that simple. If you're an asylum seeker, if you're here as a refugee, if you're here as a lawful resident, if you're here in the United States because of a humanitarian purpose, we should never yank people's food benefits away under these circumstances. And that's why this law absolutely had to be filed. It's unconscionable what's going on right now. And we expect, just like in our other suits, to be incredibly successful. I don't think it needs much more conversation than that. The day before Thanksgiving, we're in a press conference. Last thing people want to hear from is our Attorney General, but we have to be here because people absolutely need food assistance in this country, especially when we're having an affordability crisis across this country. And I'll just keep it that simple. Proud to be a lead in this lawsuit being filed in Eugene. The hope is that we'll have a preliminary injunction filed a little bit later today so that we can get in front of a judge as quickly as possible to make sure that we can get this food assistance flowing again here in the near term. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to AG Campbell.
Thank you, AG Rayfield. Thank you for your work, of course, you and your team. Thank you, AG Bonta. Thank you, AG Ellison, and the entire coalition. There's a total of 22 AGs that have filed this lawsuit, and I'm proud to stand with them once again to challenge the persistent and unlawful actions of the Trump administration. When the federal government shut down just a few months ago, we saw the Trump administration attempt to cruelly strip SNAP benefits away from millions of Americans, including 1.1 million people here in Massachusetts, even though they had the money to fully fund the program. So, of course, this coalition of AGs took them to court. And when they refused to turn the benefits back on or played games and said they would only partially fund the program, we took them to court again. And during those uncertain weeks, like many of my colleagues, we visited SNAP recipients. We volunteered at food pantries. We did everything we could to ensure our residents in our respective states were fed. We were in constant communication with our community partners who were working on the ground to also ensure that in the wealthiest country in the world, every resident would have food and most importantly, would have resources to be able to provide food to themselves or their families. I spoke to mothers who were actually cutting back on their meals to ensure their children could eat. I saw the confusion in our communities amongst our most vulnerable residents who were experiencing fear and anxiety, not knowing where their next meal would come from. And today, on the eve of Thanksgiving, a holiday that is about generosity and gratitude, I'm absolutely frustrated and angry that the Trump administration has chosen again to play political games with our residents' lives, because in many communities, this truly is about life and death. As my colleagues have remarked, when Congress passed the so-called Big Beautiful Bill this summer, it made certain immigrant groups, including refugees and asylees, ineligible for SNAP. While I disagree with that policy choice wholeheartedly, it's absolutely cruel to exclude families from food assistance. Congress had the choice to make, and they did what they were entitled to do. Then, of course, the Trump administration took this cruel step and cruel policy a step further. On October 31st, months after the Big Beautiful Bill was signed into law, the USDA issued this new guidance revoking the eligibility of these groups, even after they had been granted permanent legal status. And what's worse, it threatened states with hefty financial consequences if they did not comply. The guidance is inaccurate and it's illegal. Federal law is specific and says that refugees, asylees, humanitarian parolees, and other vulnerable legal immigrants are eligible for SNAP benefits as soon as they obtain their green cards and meet standard program requirements. The administration does not have the power to rewrite these rules just because they don't like them. And what's worse is they gave the states no time to comply with this order. They said it would end on November 1st, and less than 24 hours after the guidance was issued. They expected us to respond and to act. We also say that that is unlawful. For the past 11 months, this coalition of AGs, Democratic AGs, not one Republican, have fought every single day to protect our residents from this administration's cruel and inhumane policies. Here in Massachusetts, we filed 43 lawsuits against the Trump administration, and we protected more than $3 billion in Massachusetts investments that the federal government has put at risk. I'm proud to work with each and every one of my colleagues, and most proud to work with them to protect the basic human rights of our residents, which include children, elders, veterans, immigrants, people with disabilities, and so much more. Again, thank you to my colleagues. Thank you for always stepping up and exercising courage. Proud to be a part of this coalition with each and every one of you, and proud to turn this over to Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison.
Andrea, thank you. And thanks to all of my colleagues for your very important, timely remarks. I just got to be candid. It's downright disturbing to see just how committed Donald Trump is to making sure vulnerable people go hungry. It seems to be his top priority, or one of them. After working day and night to keep SNAP benefits turned off during the government shutdown, here we are again. Here we are fighting again to make sure that people get the food that they need on the eve of an important American holiday. We and my colleagues, we've been winning in court. We got SNAP benefits turned on for people in Minnesota and many states across the country. So Donald Trump came up with another ploy to keep people hungry. It was bad enough when he was going after folks who rely on food assistance to feed their families and keep their lives on track. Now he's going after lawful permanent residents of this country, including people who were granted asylum or came to the United States as refugees. So just imagine that. We rightly accept refugees fleeing war, famine, and persecution, people seeking a better, safer life for themselves and their families. And then Donald Trump steps in to take food off their tables once they're here. And once again, Trump is not only morally wrong, he's wrong on the law. And that's saying something, considering it's a law that he and his friends pushed through Congress. The big ugly bill, which is all I can ever call it, doesn't say anything about permanently kicking people who came to this country through legal humanitarian pathways off SNAP. The law is clear. Refugees and other vulnerable legal immigrants become eligible for SNAP once they obtain their green cards and meet other program requirements. If Trump doesn't like the law, he's welcome to try to change it through the normal, usual legal means. But we won't let him rule by fiat. We won't let him break the law, and we won't let him force people to go hungry in America. The law is also clear that USDA is supposed to give states 120 days to adjust to the new guidance, but Trump's USDA gave us just 1 day, which seems incredible to me. This could expose states to costly penalties, damaging state budgets that are already reeling from Trump's sagging economy. And so Here we are on the eve of this important American holiday. We're fighting to keep food on the table of people who are in our country lawfully and who are entitled to these benefits. And we're going to continue to be the ones who stand with American families, stand with veterans, stands with seniors, stand with children to make sure that people are not wrongfully terminated. So my fellow AGs and I are not standing by and watching. We're standing up. We're standing together. And yes, we all are Democrats, but I don't think anybody would object if we could get a Republican to join us, because all we're doing is standing against callous cruelty. Again, like others have said, tomorrow's Thanksgiving, a day when people across America gather with friends and family over a meal, a distinctly American holiday. Today, we're filing a lawsuit to make sure that people who come to America for a better life can be thankful that they did without having to go hungry. And so thank you to all, including my staff, who I'm so grateful to, and all of my colleagues. I'll yield back.
Thank you, everyone. And let me just say that no president in the history of the United States of America has fought harder to deprive hungry Americans of food, whether it be blatantly and brazenly defying the law, misinterpreting it, rushing to the Supreme Court to not feed Americans, or even when there was funding, lying and gaslighting and saying that the well is dry when the well is full. And even after they said that they were going to feed hungry Americans, taking it down from their website and reversing course. And here we are again, where eligible Americans are entitled to these benefits, but the federal administration continues to fight tooth and nail, really working overtime to deprive those eligible of the food that they deserve. And just as this president, no one has fought harder to deprive hungry Americans of food, no group of attorneys general have fought harder to make sure they are fed. And I'm proud to be part of this incredible group on the front lines. We're all in on this fight. We will keep fighting until every American who is eligible for SNAP benefits gets fed. Today is another part of that process. With that, we're happy to take your questions. Thank you.
If you'd like to ask a question, you may do so by hitting the raised hand icon at the bottom of your screen. You can also use the Q&A feature also at the bottom of the screen. First question is, how many food aid recipients is this guidance estimated to affect?
I think just briefly, I think it's tens of thousands nationwide. I don't know if anyone else has any other data points on that, but that's my understanding of the number impacted.
Yeah, in Oregon, it could be up to 3,000, and it just depends on, and we're still doing some of the background numbers, but it could be anywhere from hundreds to thousands here in Oregon.
The same in Massachusetts, 1,000.
Same in Minnesota, thousands, no question. And we're still hearing reports about a lot of pressure on food shelves. People are looking for food in multiple ways, and this is one that is available to eligible people.
Next question comes from Aton. You are now unmuted.
Thank you so much to the attorneys general on the call, including Attorney General Rob Bonta of California. Mr. Attorney General, two questions. Forgive me, and I know this is very similar to the last question, so forgive me if it's a little bit repetitive, but just to be clear, in California, it is the thought, at least, that thousands of people here will be impacted by this, number one. And number two, forgive me, because it's related to a lawsuit here, but it's another lawsuit. Are you able to just provide a comment on the Governor Newsom's lawsuit from yesterday on the homelessness or housing funding cuts? He's also suing the Trump administration over cuts to homelessness and housing. I know you don't. I know it's a little bit off topic. Forgive me. I just since there was no press conference yesterday, I'm trying to get a little bit of a comment on that as well. Thanks for your time.
Sure. Thanks, Aton. Always good to hear from you. Thanks for joining today. We know that based on the action that we're challenging today by USDA, that's trying to rip away benefits from those who are eligible, that tens of thousands of Americans will be impacted nationwide, and it's definitely in the thousands in California, could be tens of thousands in California, as we are the largest state, nearly 40 million people. So thousands for sure, maybe tens of thousands in California. And as for the lawsuit that we brought yesterday, we did do some posting with our position on it. You're right, we didn't have a press conference, but I can just tell you that the Trump administration is trying to impose unlawful and inappropriate conditions on a critical federal program that supports families and individuals, and prevents them from being homeless. And if his action is allowed to go forward, folks will be sent back into homelessness, families, individuals across this country. So it's another unlawful action. It's another cruel action. It's another action that attorneys general are standing up against the Trump administration to push back on, to hold him accountable to the rule of law.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next question. Please state your publication when you ask a question. Next question comes from Alex. You're now unmuted.
Hi, y'all. Alex Baumhart from the Oregon Capitol Chronicle. I have a quick nuts and bolts question for whoever's best to answer, and then directly for AG Rayfield. So just to clarify, the rule that changed October 31st that states were given a day to sort of grapple with was that any asylum seeker, refugee who receives their residency then goes into a 5-year period where they don't get any SNAP benefits, even if they qualify on paper. That was the change?
Yeah, and thanks for the question, Alex. And effectively, yes, and that is what's going on right now. And so really our focus was you get that 120-day grace period to kind of figure things out. That wasn't done. It was retroactive. It came on October 31st, says it applies on November 1st. Obviously, there's a lot of stringent penalties when you're not in compliance. And so the notice period was concerning, not for, and then above and beyond that, you have this values-based concern about what's going on. Again, we're like the wealthiest country in the world, and you have this issue where we are pulling back people's food benefits, where we have a pre-existing law on the books from the 90s that says that these individuals absolutely do get food assistance, because that's kind of who we are as Americans, right? If you are here lawfully, you're entitled to certain benefits, especially when it comes to food. And so this pulls that back. And again, I think the way that a lot of us are talking about it is that these are the folks that are, a lot of the folks that are here for humanitarian purposes, whether that's refugees,
Right.
whether that's asylum seekers. So that's kind of the crux of what's going on.
So, but just my last clarifying question: the imposition that the Trump administration USDA put down October 31st was a 5-year window. That's the
Yeah, the way that they're implementing, they're rolling back to the laws that were kind of put in what we call the Professional Responsibility Work Opportunity Act. So that's kind of where they're rolling back, and they're in contradiction with pre-existing law.
okay. But this Republican mega bill in the summer, tax and spending cuts, that was trying to deny SNAP benefits to immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers until they got permanent resident status. And then October 31st, they say, actually, even if you qualify, you get your residency 5-year window, you don't get to have these benefits.
Yeah, there's a conflict between their actions and the law, and that's what the lawsuit's about.
Okay. And then, sorry, my last quick question is just given the timeline here, if I had been a refugee from Afghanistan or another war-torn country that came to Oregon in the last few years, and I was on the process of getting my residency, is there any group in particular you can point to that would be most impacted, given the timeline of, when people arrived?
Yeah, we're still, so the numbers in Oregon are up to 3,000 people that could be impacted. Because you have to manually go down and look at some of these things, that's still a question that we're like, if you're asking specific groups that are being impacted, we're still digging into some of that information.
Okay, thanks.
This question is for AG Campbell. In Massachusetts, what are you hearing from the Department of Transitional Assistance, which performs the program? Any complaints or concerns from them yet about the changes?
Absolutely. We work closely with the DTA. We have with every SNAP lawsuit and other issues as well. They're concerned about the federal government threatening penalties against our state and agency. They're concerned about residents, our most vulnerable who receive SNAP benefits, not having access to food resources, especially the day before Thanksgiving. They're also concerned about just not only the unlawful guidance in this particular case, but the continued misinformation, the chaos and confusion, which makes their jobs as an agency extremely difficult. They want to always follow the law, and yet we have a federal administration that continues to break the law. So we remain in communication with that particular agency. We represent them in many ways in their interest in this case, and work closely with them as we have filed every lawsuit regarding SNAP.
This question is for AG Ellison from WCCO Radio. Can you also talk about the lawsuit being filed in response to the HUD cuts?
I'm not prepared to talk about that right now. I'm trying to focus on this SNAP thing. I'm happy to talk with you guys about HUD cuts at any time.
Next question comes from KPTV News. You are now unmuted.
Hi, Spencer Schott with Fox 12 Oregon, KPTV News. Question for AG Rayfield. At the beginning of the press conference, you mentioned that there were 48 lawsuits filed in California in the last 44 weeks. How many lawsuits has been filed against the Trump administration in Oregon since he took office?
Well, one thing that we say around the office here in Oregon is that California is always trying to keep up with Oregon, and they've done that right now. So both California and Oregon have 48 lawsuits filed.
And then a quick follow-up question: is Oregon able to supplement any funding to SNAP recipients here in the state while we're waiting for these lawsuits to go through?
That's one of the ongoing questions and kind of the unique partnerships that we have with the executive branch and the governor. The governor's really working on implementation and making sure that every Oregonian has food on their plate. That's a value that we all share. We're in this lane of trying to make sure that we actually get the funding going again to kind of ease that burden. A ton of credit should be given to our governor, who acted really earlier in some of the SNAP issues that were going on. I expect her to continue to do some of the same, but there's some realities that she has that she would be better in a position to address in terms of the flexibility of funds.
Thank you.
Next question was about timing. Why did we wait weeks after receiving the USDA letter to respond?
I think part of it was to make sure that's not a mistake and to work with them. I mean, if it were a mistake, which we had a reasonable belief that it was, they could fix it right away and then there's no lawsuit needed. So I think that's an appropriate good faith effort for us to engage in. Unfortunately, we found out based on their non-response that it seems to be a deliberate, cruel and unlawful action demanding this lawsuit.
I mean, and to AG Bonta's point, I mean, what do you expect from your government? You expect your government to be responsive. You expect your government to actually be focused on what the law is and how it's written. And when something seems so obviously wrong, we sent a letter, I think it was on the 19th of November. And that's the letter that when I answered, we waited 1 week. And then we got right in the courtroom. The entire time we're preparing and being ready because we know that under this Trump administration, these types of actions are thinkable, right? When they used to be unimaginable. So a very strange world that we're living in right now.
Next question comes from Jana. You are now unmuted.
Yeah, this question is for Attorney General Ellison. I'm with the NBC affiliate in Minneapolis, Minnesota, KARE 11 TV. AG Ellison, can you set the scene for me right now in our state? How were the folks that this affects notified? And does it mean right now, on this night before this big holiday, they don't have their SNAP benefits for November?
Well, let me tell you, right now in Minnesota, the scene is that families we have a lot of financial stress all around. We've seen really weakness in the labor market. We've seen real wages going down. We've seen an escalation in all kinds of payments that people are supposed to make, whether it's credit card payments, student loan payments. We've seen increases in bankruptcy. So what we see all across the country and in Minnesota is a very, very precarious financial situation, particularly for the most vulnerable people. At this point, we have to step up and make sure that people get these benefits as fast as we can, which is why we're going to be seeking a temporary injunction in TRO in Oregon today. So we need to act expeditiously and quickly because people are in a very precarious financial situation at the moment. So yeah, that's where we are. I can also tell you locally, Second Harvest Food Shelf, they're getting increased requests for services. Anybody listening, please donate or volunteer to help them. Yeah, things are tough here in Minnesota as they are around the country for people who need SNAP benefits, particularly the community the communities that are new arrivals to our country but are lawfully and legally here.
Thank you. Next question is for AG Bonta from KQED. Clarifying question. For the people impacted, can they currently access CalFresh benefits? Are there plans for temporary support systems on a statewide level? And if so, what are those?
Thank you. We are acting quickly here to nip in the bud this attempted prohibition of SNAP benefits from those who are eligible. So our hope is that those who are eligible under the law, not subject to this misinterpretation by the USDA and their guidance, will continue to receive benefits smoothly. That's our goal. And we're filing the complaint today and the preliminary injunction papers to help ensure that. The state and food banks have been stepping up to provide more support, but the amount of funds here, generally when it came to SNAP, and then specifically when it comes to the groups impacted here, asylees and refugees and humanitarian parolees, it's significant. So our goal is to block this unlawful attempt to withhold support from these groups and make sure that they continue to receive it smoothly throughout.
Next question comes from Katie. You are now unmuted.
My question is for AG Campbell in Massachusetts. This is Katie Castellani with the State House News Service. A few weeks ago, Governor Moore Healy announced that all eligible SNAP recipients were getting their benefits. And I was curious, how does this guidance affect those eligible recipients? Is there any overlap between those affected by this guidance and those who have been receiving their SNAP benefits this month?
Thank you, Katie, for the question. So right now, Massachusetts is following the law. So we are continuing to make sure that every resident who is eligible for SNAP benefits receives SNAP benefits. And that is as a result of this Democratic AG coalition with respect to our prior lawsuits on SNAP, and then of course the government opening up again. And so we'll continue to do that. If anything, our lawsuit today is to ensure that immigrants of certain status, asylum seekers, or asylee, I should say, folks who are here as refugees and other groups who are here lawfully, have gone through a procedure to obtain, for example, their green card and met every standard, they are eligible as soon as they receive that green card. As soon as they get that lawful status, they are eligible for SNAP benefits. So our lawsuit is to ensure that those residents here in Massachusetts continue to receive SNAP benefits. So we're asking the court to make a ruling, hopefully as soon as possible, that this USDA guidance is unlawful and is not only crude, but unlawful, and that these residents, these immigrant residents, are eligible for SNAP benefits, including here in Massachusetts.
Thank you.
This question is from GBH News in Boston. Point of clarification for anyone. Does this impact asylum seekers or people who already have asylum?
So folks who have asylum and have status here are eligible for SNAP benefits. The USDA has put out this guidance to say those folks who are here lawfully do not have access to SNAP benefits. They have taken what Congress has done further. Congress had the ability, of course, to craft restrictions on SNAP, and they have decided to restrict SNAP benefits for certain populations of immigrants, including refugees and asylum seekers, which is cruel and unfortunate to say the least, and unconscionable. And I disagree with that congressional policy decision, yet they had the power to do it. Where the USDA has gotten it wrong is they have taken that too far and said that asylum seekers, for example, who have gained permanent status are not eligible for SNAP benefits. That is unlawful. They are, and so our lawsuit is seeking to protect those residents in our state.
Next question comes from Dave. You are now unmuted.
Yes, good morning. And we sure appreciate all the Attorney Generals talking about this today. So my main concern, of course, is how these people will be fed. I think the Attorney Generals have addressed this to an extent. I think maybe get some more from Attorney General Campbell and Attorney General Rayfield on this. But what is being done to make sure these people don't go hungry while they're waiting for a court decision?
Well, I'll just say we were successful, this coalition, when we fought the Trump administration the first time during the government shutdown, to make sure that SNAP benefits would continue to flow for the month of November and to ensure all folks eligible in our respective states received benefits in November, and not partial, but full benefits. And our lawsuits and collective lawsuits have fought for that. Now that the government has reopened, we're continuing to ensure SNAP benefits are flowing. And we're fighting back today to ensure that certain immigrants who are eligible for SNAP benefits continue to receive those benefits. We are doing this work to ensure the federal government is not only delivering the resources that our residents deserve, but that, frankly, the SNAP program was designed for. At the same time, we're also working with our food pantries here in Massachusetts, our community-based organizations, all of our food ecosystem folks and stakeholders to ensure our people are fed. So food pantries and many volunteers and many folks have been working overtime to close the gap. In addition to that, we have put out resources at the state level and through various channels to ensure folks who need food have access to food. But both actions complement each other. Our lawsuits are important to ensure the federal government delivers resources to our states that we're entitled to. And the second is, of course, ensuring that if there's any gap because of the chaos and confusion by the federal government, that our food pantries, our state resources are also available to close those gaps if they exist.
Great. And then Attorney General Rayfield, if you can comment on that as well, about what's happening to keep these people from going hungry.
Yeah, and the way that I would think about this is that each state has to manage their unique circumstances the way that they do. And each state has different resources to be able to combat. And so one state might have more available resources if they choose to backfill and provide benefits. Other folks might use existing dollars with the reliance that we are operating lawfully. And that exactly as AG Campbell talked about, I think we are already set up here in Oregon across this country with a very unique public-private partnership where people have come together. And again, I think this is a testament to the American value that no one should go hungry in this country. And we've seen people come out of the woodwork to make sure that folks have food on the table. And I know that that's happening in Oregon. I know it's happening outside. So it is going to be a combination of this public-private partnership as we move forward to kind of fill those gaps. And I feel very fortunate that here in Oregon, all levels of government, from our legislature all the way on up to the governor, are kind of collaborating to make sure that folks don't go hungry at the holiday time.
And my question for Attorney General Bonta is, how quickly do you think a court ruling on this could come? And do you think that this is a case that could potentially go all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court?
I mean, we move with urgency because the moment is urgent and people need food and they need to eat now. And so that's why we have often in our cases moved for emergency relief in different forms, either a temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction. We are seeking a preliminary injunction here. In the past, we've sought restraining orders on the day we filed, and we've secured restraining orders on the day we filed. So there's parts of litigation that move slowly, but there's parts that move fast by design. And so that's what a preliminary injunction is about. It's certainly likely to be days out, but who knows? The court could we've had cases where the court says, come in the day after Thanksgiving and have the hearing, just days later, and can rule from the bench. So we could get relief very quickly depending on the judge and how they see the merits of our arguments, and we think they're really strong. Could this go to the U.S. Supreme Court? Maybe. I have my doubts as to why this kind of issue would go to the U.S. Supreme Court. It could go, to the Supreme Court on what we call the emergency docket, where we get a preliminary injunction And this administration continues to fight tooth and nail and work overtime to deprive Americans who are eligible of food. And they could seek a stay from the appellate court. Maybe the appellate court won't give it, and then they'll go to the U.S. Supreme Court. So that's possible. That scenario has happened in the past. But would it go to the U.S. Supreme Court on the full-blown merits of the issue presented here? I have my doubts. Usually you need a split in the circuits and some percolation in the lower courts for different decisions. And so it's more likely to go up on the emergency docket than on merits. And even then, I have my doubts.
And you have said before, I believe, that the Democratic law attorney generals have won 80% of these legal actions against the Trump administration. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
You're right.
Now, what is the percentage of ones that you have won on appeal of lower court rulings that had originally favored the Trump administration?
On appeal, we're almost always winning on the trial court level.
I see.
And the Trump administration is having some success getting stays, and they're just temporary. These are procedural. They're either administrative stays or stays pending appeal. They are not winning on the merits. But the stay leads to harm to Americans because it allows the unlawful conduct, in our view, to continue during the pendency of the stay. But they've been getting some stays on appeal, and then they've been getting some stays from the Supreme Court. But when courts issue orders, temporary restraining orders, preliminary injunctions, more and more permanent injunctions, final judgments after when the proceedings in the lower court are complete, we're winning a vast majority of the time, over 80% of the time.
Over 80%. Okay. And then last question is for the Minnesota Attorney General Ellison. How many lawsuits have you filed against the Trump administration?
I think we are at about 45. I'd have to give you an accurate number. We filed, there was the HUD one yesterday. So I think I'd put us at 45, but it could be, I'd say 45.
Okay, great. Thank you all for that.
Thank you.
And those were the last questions.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Thanks to my amazing colleagues. All the best to everyone and your families.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rob and your team. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.